Hey guys, Trev here from Spinewise, and today I want to talk to you about neck pain and most importantly, neck pain with degeneration. So what is the degeneration component? Sometimes you hear it as arthritis, which isn't really the right word because arthritis really means inflammation of a joint. What we're talking about is degenerative joint disease, which is DJD, which comes from a whole lot of different things, such as biomechanical changes to your neck, healing patterns, past injuries. There's a whole lot of different things that can drive degeneration in the neck. But one of the common misconceptions is that if you're losing movement in the neck, so if you can't turn either side, bend side to side or flex, if you're losing motion, that must mean that your neck is degenerating, and nothing can be further from the truth. Whilst there's no doubt that degeneration is associated with restrictions in movement, it doesn't necessarily mean that because you have restriction in movement that you're suffering from degeneration as well. So we're going to talk about a couple of things and ways that you can determine whether or not that might be you and you may have a degenerative problem. Before we do that, let me just show you what degeneration looks like because many people aren't aware of it. So on the left here, what we have is a relatively normal, healthy cervical spine, so a neck. So we are facing off in this direction this way. This is relatively healthy. I wouldn't say it's perfectly normal, but it's pretty close to a healthy neck. So the first thing we should see is this nice smooth curve coming through the whole way. All the back of the vertebrae are nice and lined up, relatively square, healthy vertebrae with nice even disc spaces in between, progressively getting bigger as we head down. And that's generally what we expect to see from a nice, healthy looking neck. If we have a look now at this one, we're starting to get early signs of degeneration through this neck. So we can see that curve is coming through here, but then we start losing it as we come off in the other direction, the upper area here. So we've got some strain patterns going through there where there's a lot of stress being put on these joints. We should be in perfect alignment, and I'm just going to link my lines there. We should be in perfect alignment at the back of the vertebrae as well. These all line up nicely. As we start getting higher here, we start getting little steps where they're almost having a little bit of a slide forward, and this is signs of instability in these areas as well. And instability generally means that damage is potentially occurring or that you're getting stress in areas that shouldn't have stress like that. So the result of that is the body's going to have to try and heal that tissue up, and that often leads to calcium laydown, bone changes, structural changes, and long-term degeneration. So if we come through this area here, now we're starting to see the effects of degeneration coming through. So we can see through here, we've still got relatively healthy square vertebrae up here, but as we come down here, we can see that space here has really thinned out quite significantly. Our vertebrae here, while it's smooth here, this one we're kind of getting this lipping that's occurring on either side. We've got this rough kind of appearance through this area here. And same in this upper one, we can see it's almost flattened out like that as we go through. And this is the area that becomes really, really important because once we start getting to this point, that's when the degeneration is really kicking in. Now we start running the risk of these points pushing into nerves, and we start having effects of what we call stenosis as well, which we can talk about in a little bit more detail on another day. But these are real common issues. So does movement, or is movement restricted if you have a neck like this? Well, the answer is that it's definitely going to be changed in some way, shape or form. But it doesn't necessarily mean that because you have restriction in your neck that this is what's going on. So we know most of range of motion, or most of the movement that occurs in the neck, is actually muscular guided, ligamentous supported. So over time, especially if you've ever had, for example, a morning where you've woken up, you haven't slept properly, you'll find your neck is really stiff and sore, you don't want to move it. That's not degeneration. So what you're actually seeing is muscular change because of strain patterns. Likewise, we know that kind of spoken a little bit trigeminal neuralgia, trigeminal neuropathy, things like this recently. Likewise, we know if you're getting irritation to your brainstem through the trigeminal or other complexes, we'll start getting a tightening of one side of the neck in relation to the other, and the result is we'll have limited movement one side compared to the other, and that can also change pain movement patterns and still not be associated with degeneration. So just because you've got movement problems doesn't mean you're having degeneration. However, any kind of movement pattern potentially has the ability to lead to degeneration if it's not dealt with correctly, because movement is not being not functioning correctly. So one of the key things we see with people who have degenerative arthritis, and there's a couple of key markers, but one of the key things we see with this is that people often have stiffness first thing in the morning. And it doesn't last too long, maybe a few minutes up to an hour or so. And this degeneration overnight, normally when you're moving, you're pumping the fluid out of joints so the inflammation goes. Overnight when you're stationary, that fluid accumulates and that creates that level of stiffness in there first thing in the morning. So this is a big problem. One of the key signs that we see in people who have arthritis and inflammatory degenerative arthritis is that morning stiffness. The other one, which is really, really strange, and you might think this is a bit weird, but the other one is you'll often find degenerative joints tend to hurt prior to it raining. And that's just because as the barometric pressure drops, pressure in the atmosphere goes down, pressure inside us stays at the same level, so you get stretching of all those joint capsules, which should adapt to it, but they don't adapt very well when you have degeneration. So most people with degenerative joints can sense it's about to rain. And sometimes they'll pick it up a few hours beforehand, sometimes half an hour or so, sometimes even perhaps the night before it's going to rain, depending on how severe the issue is and how rapid the changes in barometric pressure. Anyway guys, I hope that gives you a little bit more information about movement in the neck and why just because you've got restricted movement that it doesn't necessarily mean you've got degeneration going on, and also why it is so important to get movement restored as quickly as possible. Don't leave that restriction. We need to act on it fast to make sure it doesn't lead to these kind of degenerative patterns as well. Anyway guys, if you have any questions and all that, just post up in the comments below. Otherwise, send me a message. Always happy to help up in any way, shape or form that I can. Otherwise, if you don't have any other questions, I shall catch you in the next vid. Bye for now.